Hello, everyone. I'm Soda, and I am here with my friend Jamie, who is not only a book cover designer or ex-book cover designer, but also a writer. And she is here today to talk a little bit about book covers and the importance of them and everything. So, Jamie, do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about what's going on in your life?
Sure. So I'm Jamie Dalton. For the book community, you guys know me as Magnetra or from Magnetra's Design. I did book cover design for around 4 years. I actually started when I started working on my first book, and I had this thought process if I wanted to learn how to market and how to be able to do my own covers, and I wanted to learn how to publish before I started publishing so that I could kind of fix that learning curve a little bit. And so I started learning how to do it myself. And at this point, I've made a little over 500 book covers for authors that are out in the world. Some of them are not published yet, but I started publishing my first book about a year and a half ago, and then I've had my author stuff take off in a very unexpected way to where it took over my cover design income, which was already paying the bills. So over the last couple months, I had to make the decision of stopping cover design and just finishing out stuff for people so that I could focus on my author stuff. But my specialty either way is in learning how to use tropes as a superpower in all aspects of cover design. So that includes, in all aspects of publishing. So that includes cover design.
I didn't realize that you went from writing to cover design. I just thought I thought it was kind of vice versa. So that's really interesting. Would you say that like learning about other cultures and really opening your mind to new things has helped with both your writing and your book cover design?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Part of it too is because it helped shape a unique voice, both in my art style and in my writing style. Just because storytelling is so different between each culture. And so I've always loved mythology and gods and like seeing how different cultures tell stories. And so I think kind of just seeing what elements I like from each one has let me learn how to tell stories with both art and in writing in a unique, fast-paced, kind of sassy way.
That's something I've definitely noticed with a little bit of writing that I have seen of yours and your art. It feels very like different elements kind of brought together in a really beautiful way. What are some of the most important things that both writers and book cover designers should know about tropes in general?
Really, the trick is that to make a book that's going to sell really well is to make something unique but marketable. So no matter if it's for your cover or for what you're writing, to make a marketable book, you really want to learn what tropes your audience that you're trying to hit really are enjoying and what are evergreen tropes, meaning that what are tropes that they're always looking for, because oftentimes it takes us a year or more to get a book out. And trends, especially with Book Talk and Bookstagram, trends for books disappear by the time you've got a book ready to go if you didn't start it until then.
When it comes to book covers, I know that there's certain tropes for mystery books, for fantasy books, for sci-fi books. And what are some important things to really show in the book cover?
So when you're looking at book covers, you want to look at the ones that are selling well within the last year or two. They don't have to have been published, but a lot of times they've been recovered or that kind of thing. And you want to look and see what are the best selling ones in that chunk of time. And then look and see what is common. So cover tropes would be things like saturation, colors, contrast, color tones, fonts, which fonts is the number one mistake I see authors make trying to do their own covers and new designers. It's absolutely the number one. Font treatments, art style. You just want to look and see what the commonalities are, and those are the cover tropes. So for example, sci-fi is always going to be a serif font, so like very blocky looking letters. But then like fantasy is going to be sans serif, which has a little bit more curve to it. If you want to hint that there's romance in the book, then your font is going to have a little bit more swishes or swirls or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like paranormal romance or anything that has like magic in it tends to have glowy elements, a few at least glowy elements, and high contrast. Sci-fi does the same sort of thing. But then at the same time, like cozy fantasy tends to go for a little bit more muted tones and lower contrast.
So you would say probably out of all the art skills, typography would be the number one thing if you're wanting to go into book cover design.
Oh yeah. And it's honestly the hardest one to get down. Most people take at least a year and a half. And that my best advice for anyone who wants to try and figure out how to do it, there's two main things. Well, really three. I already mentioned one of them is to pay attention and look at what fonts, and you can do a quick Google search for like reverse font search, and you can put up a cover or anything and it'll tell you what fonts are on it and how to find them. So that's a great way to be able to kind of help with that. But if you're looking at making book covers, your book cover, the art itself will look naked and unbalanced without the typography. The typography needs to be part of it, and it needs to be low contrast behind where you are going to put the text, or else it's going to be almost impossible to read. And then when you're really kind of trying to figure out how to be able to do that balance and how to make it look professional and not DIY, it's the same thing as when you're learning basic art skills. Look and try to imitate pick out a couple covers you really like and try and figure out how to make the typography look like that one. And then mess around with the phrases and do similar patterns and weights and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because typography is those things that I've always wanted to learn.
It's so hard.
Yeah, it kind of hurts my brain. But I think it would be so useful. So you touched on colors, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about like what colors symbolize certain emotions, how that might affect a book cover, and the importance of color theory.
Yeah, definitely. So colors are definitely tropes for hinting at what is in the book. So for example, 99.9% of vampire books are going to have red, some sort of element. So even if it's a typography cover and there is nothing on it that says blood, there's nothing on it that says this is vampire, it's probably still going to have a touch of red. But then like paranormal romance or villains tends to be like blues and greens and purples, just because those are tropes. They're colors that we subconsciously connect with being that. But then when you're also considering colors and how to do it for tropes, you really have to pay attention to the saturation of the colors, because different tones of green will tell different things. So for example, a like bright, almost kind of neon green is going to give you more of a paranormal or sci-fi vibe. But if you're pushing it into like emerald greens, that's telling you more fantasy. But then if you're going more for like a green like your shirt, it would be more rom-com or like cozy. Like, so you kind of have to pay a little bit of attention, but then at the same time you mix and match. Like really the trick to make a marketable cover or marketable character art is really to do a combination of like your sub genres with your main genre. So like, for example, Legends and Lattes is one of the better known covers right now.
I bought it just for the cover.
It's so good, right? And it's so funny because it's one of those ones, I should have grabbed it. It's one of those ones that when you break it down, it makes like the marketing on it is genius, because the body language of it is very relaxed. It gives you those I'm hanging out in a coffee shop vibes. But then the art style is high fantasy. So you know it's going to be a relaxed high fantasy. It's not high contrast. It's not The colors are not like loud and in your face, and there's not super dramatic anything. And even the fonts are the same kind of thing. The fonts are fantasy fonts, but like nothing about it screams romance. So you know it's not going to be a heavy romance type of book. I actually just read the arc for book 2 in that. I will say I liked it even better than book 1. It was really, really good.
I still need to read book 1. I just bought it for the book cover, and I'm like,
the cover's so pretty.
in my bathroom, like it's my book.
It's a really good bathroom read. I will give you that. But yeah, that's really the trick to make a unique and marketable cover, though, is just to pick what your main genre is. Mm-hmm. Make sure you have a couple elements in it that are for the main genre. And I definitely suggest making sure your fonts, including the author name font, fits in that. And then play with your little sub ones, because most authors don't write straight one genre. Most authors at this point in time mix in little extra elements. So like we're seeing a lot more paranormal type things added into fantasy settings. We're seeing a lot more little things slipped in. So most are technically multi-genre books, and that's what makes them fun and unique. But you really have to kind of figure out, and most designers that are not experienced, that people can afford, and especially if you're hiring an illustrator yourself, most people don't know those tropes. As an author, it's your job to come in and have figured that out yourself so that you make sure you get the most marketable thing you can. And you got to pay attention to your country too. It probably seems silly, but
no, because like certain tropes, like I noticed a lot of books have totally different covers for their country because certain tropes work.
Yeah. Like a lot of European countries don't do people on covers at all. Even fantasy, like they do not do people on covers. They don't sell nearly as well. But then like here, an evergreen fantasy cover, you could get a really good illustrated cover with people on it, and it will like be okay to use forever.
When I tried getting a book cover for some short stories from some of those really cheap book cover options, I noticed that they used a lot of stock art that I would see on other covers. And I'm like, okay, I want something unique. And so I noticed that a lot of authors are trying to make their own book cover, whether it's just sticking with graphics so they don't run into that issue I was dealing with, or using AI art. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on, first, what are some important things to know about licensing and using some images in your book cover? And then I also want to hear some of your thoughts on using AI art on your book cover.
Definitely talk about that. So I will first say, if you are going to look at using stock images for anything, make sure to read their terms and conditions, which I know is painful. But fortunately, I was raised by a family of lawyers. So like I just grew up doing that. And I used to like compete with Parley Pro in high school. So like I can read all that jargon and it makes sense. I'm fine with making stuff in Canva, but I highly suggest people avoid using Canva for stock photos, partially because they constantly change their terms and conditions. So they have a lot of little sneaky things in there, like if there's anything that is sexually explicit in your book, you are not allowed to use their stuff and they can come after you legally. We have to admit, many authors have some spice sprinkled in their books, and that's a big problem, but they don't know that that could potentially become a problem later. A lot of free sites, and honestly, a lot of sites don't legally back their photos. So, for example, the main one that I use is Deposit Photos. They're the cheapest. And if you watch a couple times a year, I think it's called AppSumo. I think that's what it's called. They run a deal every couple of months where for like $40 you get 100 photos, or for like $30 I think it is, you get 100 photos. So they're like 20 something cents a piece per photo, and it never expires, and you can use them for ads, you can use them for whatever you want, even for like chapter headers and art inside your book, art underneath the dust jacket. Like So you can use it for all sorts of that kind of stuff. The only thing you can't use it for without paying for their extra license is if you're going to put it on merch that you're selling the merch as its own thing. But like you can put it on your boxes and that kind of stuff. But part of why I use them is because they actually have in their contract that they will legally back you up to $300,000 in legal fees if it turns out that like the stuff was not did not meet their standards. So like if it was stolen art, which as a cover designer, I have had my art stolen constantly and people trying to resell it. So knowing that like I have a company backing me where if something happened, I have $300,000 in legal fees backing me when most sites do not offer that. That was incredibly helpful for me. Um, yeah. And honestly, I will say I'm not against using stock photos for covers. There's some genres like contemporary romance where that's kind of the expectation because it's so expensive to get your own photo shoot. But if you're doing something like paranormal romance or fantasy or that kind of thing, at least try to find somebody who is willing to take a whole bunch of pieces and rework them so it doesn't look just like someone else's. And if you are working with somebody, take the art that they send you as the test and do a reverse image search on Google, and it will show you other covers that are using it, other ones that are similar. That way you can get a good vibe to make sure that at the very least, a really big, well-known book is not already using that so readers aren't coming after you. Because there's a few stock photos I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole because they've got some massive books that use them. So just something to think about. I will say I'm a very middle ground person when it comes to AI. I feel like it has a purpose and I feel like it is incredibly useful for so many things. I just feel like at the moment, especially for the art community, um, there's a really weird gray area right now that is making it very, very difficult. So personally, I will use stuff like Midjourney for inspiration
Yeah.
for me to use, but I will not use it for marketing personally or on a cover, just because it hasn't been cleared up in a way that I feel comfortable using. Um, I will say I do feel like the company that is the closest to getting it into a spot that feels at least somewhat ethical to use would actually be Adobe.
Adobe Firefly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I use Photoshop and I actually downloaded their beta and they still use their stuff in there. I will say the beta version with the AI generative is like mind blowing. It is so incredible. And it's been great because I've had a few times when I've tested it with my own art and I've had it like add edges or like cover text and it matched my art style with that. So I feel, and because of their terms and conditions and the way that they're changing things, I think if they give enough time that artists could pull, who are not comfortable having their stuff used, could pull out, which I think is what they're doing right now. I think it's probably going to be the first one that comes out that feels fairly ethical for the artists.
Yeah.
Because they still technically get used for the use. They still technically get paid for the use. Like I said, I would not feel comfortable putting it on covers, but also the reader community has some serious backlash against authors right now who are using it.
Yes.
So bad.
I've seen some books completely boycotted because of AI art. So that is a huge reason.
I have a friend. Yeah, I have a friend who had a Kickstarter and the Kickstarter was doing phenomenal, but she used AI and somebody called her out for it. And over half of her Kickstarter funding was canceled because of it. And she was like, never again. I'm like, yeah, I don't blame you. I totally don't blame you.
Yeah, I used, so I did a book cover last year and I drew out everything and it was before AI got like super controversial and I just used it to add some detail or whatever.
Yeah.
I got so much hate for it.
Yes.
I read it in the book. I will never use AI for but yeah, so I also, something important, I think you might have taught me this, but when you buy stock footage, I learned, and you get this standard license. That is only for packaging, which does include the book cover. The book cover counts
Yep.
as advertisement, so it falls under the standard one, but anything inside the book, any book illustrations inside there, any merch, that does not fall under.
Yeah. Yeah, for most places you have to pay the extra for that because then it's considered. So for example, with Amazon, you don't have to consider it a second edition unless a certain percentage of the book is changed. But the cover does not count as part of that percentage. Neither does like your map inside. There's a few things like that, and like technically tax wise, that was something that blew my mind. Was the US government considers covers to be packaging. And so it was not sold as an item that like the taxes on it were weird. It took forever to find an accountant who could understand how to do my taxes as a cover designer because they all kept trying to charge me like all these extra tax things. And I was like, no, that's not how this works. I just need someone local. It was kind of brutal.
If an artist traces an image, but they change it a certain amount, like what do you know if there's specific rules about like how much something needs to be changed or anything like that when it comes to book covers?
There's not an official one. It kind of depends on how exactly it was done. And honestly, because there's not an official amount for that, it would literally come down to if it went to court and judge wise, and honestly, how much money you potentially lose. And it's so hard because as artists, we study off of other art to learn skills. So like a lot of times we will look at something and we'll make something kind of similar to practice shading or practice body poses or, that kind of thing. And we're literally taught to do that in art classes. That is standard practice in the artist community. But then sometimes you accidentally make something so similar to something else, not even remembering the art you've seen. I got hit with that for one thing. And I felt so dumb. Like it was obviously not a copy, but enough people thought that it was too close to where like I had a huge hit in my cover design business for a while. And the funny thing is it wasn't similar to other covers. It was just a piece of art that I had studied from an artist that I loved. That I apparently accidentally made something too close to it. And I didn't even remember the piece of art. It was in a Pinterest folder that I had saved one time, like a year before I made this. And I hadn't seen it since, and I couldn't remember it. Like someone else brought it to my attention. But you do have to be careful because, especially as an artist and a cover designer, sometimes you're not allowed in the author community. So you can be getting dragged through the mud and have no idea why your business suddenly got like just tore to pieces. That was what happened with that. I had no idea it was happening until an author that worked with me was like, heads up. It's like, thank you.
Oh, yeah, little things can just all right, so final question. All right, for someone who wants to learn how to make their own book covers, or a book cover for a friend or family, do you know of any courses or any what's in addition to typography, what are some of the most important things that they should learn and that they should kind of look out for?
Definitely learning compositions and expected compositions for different genres, and then learning what art styles are the tropes for different genres. And kind of I always suggest people to specialize in something, not because it's not fun to do so many. It's just, it takes a lot to learn how to make something that is truly marketable. There are a lot of resources on like YouTube that you can pull up. If you want to learn stuff like how to paint hair, I highly suggest looking at Story Wrapper's website. She is a fantastic cover designer, and she actually has a free hair course, free hair painting course, a free like some free hairbrushes for Photoshop, and then she has some like advanced ones that you can pay for. And then also Jeff Brown Graphics. He is actually who I learned from, and a lot of the best cover designers right now worked with him. He's like a $2,000 to $3,000 cover designer. And he has a course actually that you can do with him. I want to say it was like $100. It's around $100 last I looked, and you get a ton of brushes. And it doesn't just go through like basic art. He teaches how to find tropes, how to do all this stuff. And he brings on a lot of other people to help as well. But he even did like parts of some of Sarah J. Maas's covers and like some huge things. So for someone who knows stuff and the things he doesn't know for these courses, he brings in people who do know. And so I highly suggest if you're like going to be seriously looking into that kind of thing, definitely take a look at that.
Awesome. Yeah, I do remember you telling me about him before, so I've been wanting to take his course. But yeah, so thank you so much. Sorry, I was a little all over the place today.
All good. I squirrel so badly. No worries.
I am going to put links to all of Jamie's books down below and her social media and anything else you want to give me. And we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.